Amid the hustle and bustle of Toronto, Canada, we follow the story of a young man named Mark. Coming from a mixed Canadian-Russian family background, Mark grew up speaking two languages, English and Russian, on a daily basis. One morning, Mark woke up to the sound of his mother, Bella, reminding him to help clean up the yard. Later that afternoon, they would be having lunch with his uncle's fiancée, Zina. Zina, a woman from Moscow, had decided to move to Canada after marrying Fima, her husband who was originally from Russia. Fima, Mark's father's younger brother, Roman, married Zina after divorcing his first wife, about whom little was known. Zina was also a widow with a daughter named Natasha, who was now 14 years old. After that, Mark and his cousin Jana felt a bit awkward when they first met Zina. They weren't used to some of Zina's peculiar habits, like her dislike of bright spotlights in the house. Bella, Mark's mother, quickly scolded them both, telling them not to comment too much about their soon-to-be aunt. Despite the cultural differences, Zina turned out to be a kind person and quickly bonded with Mark's family. The next day, Zina's family arrived in Toronto from Russia for her wedding with Fima. One of them was Natasha, Mark's new cousin, who would now be living with him. After returning from the airport, Mark resumed his work routine as a courier. However, his job wasn't delivering online shopping packages. It was delivering weed for his friend Rufus. Mark chose that job because it paid better than working as a waiter at a fried chicken restaurant. Zina and Fima eventually got married, and after that, life went on as usual. However, Natasha wasn't happy about her mother's marriage. She didn't want to leave Moscow, her friends, or her old life. She also felt awkward in her new environment, especially since she was naturally quiet. Fortunately, Bella was very caring and encouraged Natasha to get to know the family better. She asked Mark to give Natasha a tour of the house and introduce her to every part of it. They walked around, eventually ending up in Mark's room, which he often used to be alone. There an unusual conversation took place. Natasha innocently asked if Mark often brought girls into his room. Mark immediately shut down the question, saying she was too young, but Natasha casually replied that she had done it plenty of times before and was ready to do it with him if he wanted. Mark felt extremely uncomfortable and explained that they couldn't do that because they were cousins. But Natasha responded, "We're not really cousins, are we?" In his daily life, Mark wasn't just a weed courier. He also worked a side job in customer service, a cover to hide his illegal activities. But their simple, tension-filled life was starting to take a deeper turn. At night, Bella once again asked Mark to spend time with Natasha, as she felt Natasha was lonely in this new country. The next day, Mark took Natasha around the city while running his courier errands. Natasha began to feel closer to Mark, which even caught the attention of Rufus, Mark's friend. However, Mark firmly warned Rufus not to try anything, as Natasha was still underage. During their trip, Natasha became curious about why Rufus lived alone. Mark explained that Rufus's parents had divorced, and his wealthy father had remarried a young woman who was a former Miss Canada. After chatting for a while, Mark took Natasha out for lunch, and that's when their bond grew even stronger. After their meal, Mark took Natasha home, and before leaving, she told him she would be coming over again tomorrow. That afternoon, Roman asked Mark about his job since Mark always seemed to have money. Mark casually replied that he worked with a friend who ran an online buying and selling business, mainly for gadgets. Roman was curious. "Your friend doesn't go to school?" Mark answered, "He has a master's degree in technology." Impressed, Roman said, "Wow, your friend is really smart. You should learn a lot from him." Roman and Bella did have high expectations for Mark to excel academically, even though Mark preferred to follow his own path. The next day, Natasha came to see Mark, just as she had promised. As soon as she arrived, she became curious about the philosophy book Mark was reading. After that, Mark took her around the city while continuing his routine as a courier. Natasha's beauty naturally caught the attention of the local guys, but luckily she ignored them completely. After they got home, Natasha asked, "Do your parents know about your job?" Mark honestly admitted that the money was pretty good. Natasha became even more curious and asked if she could try the product. Mark agreed. But just then, Bella came to check the mailbox and invited Natasha to join them for dinner. At the dinner table, Roman gave Natasha some advice. Even though it might be hard at first to leave your old life behind, you can build a better future here. This country is great. Study hard so you can be smart and won't have to work like Mark later. The next day, Natasha came to see Mark again. This time, Mark had already prepared a small package for her to try. He only gave her a little to make sure she wouldn't get too high. After that, Natasha opened Mark's laptop and found a funny video he had been watching, making her smile. "No need to be embarrassed," she said, then showed him a website full of her own photos and videos. She then teased Mark, suggesting that they should go on a date. Casually, Natasha started talking. "Actually, there are a lot more videos, but only a few are online because we were underage back then." She also revealed that she and her friends were once offered by a director to make videos and were paid $10 at the time. However, now Natasha regrets everything. Mark then asked, "Were you still active before you moved here?" Natasha shook her head and said she had stopped after her mom found out. Since then, Natasha and Mark had grown even closer, to the point where they were basically dating. Even though Natasha had a complicated past, Mark seemed to love her deeply. They also started spending the night together regularly, even though it wasn't official, as was common in Mark's area. Mark took Natasha to various parties with his friends and even drove her around the city, keeping their relationship a secret, so Natasha's parents wouldn't find out. After they got home, Bella told Natasha that Fima had called and said he and Zena were going on vacation. Because of that, Bella invited Natasha to stay over. Feeling excited, Natasha immediately agreed. That night, Natasha suddenly woke up and nudged Mark because she couldn't sleep. In a soft voice, she said, "Mark, you're really lucky to have a family like this." Then, she started talking about how her mom still often called her dad in Moscow, especially when Fima was at work. Zena even sent money to her ex-husband. Whenever Fima asked who she was calling, Zena would always say it was her mother. A few days ago, Natasha had told Fima about her mom's behavior, but he didn't believe her, and now they had gone on vacation together, just to show how much he loved Zena. The next day, Zena and Fima came to pick up Natasha, but she didn't feel ready to leave because she was comfortable there. Hearing this, Zena immediately said, "I know why you like it here," revealing that she already knew what was going on between Natasha and Mark. Upon hearing that, Natasha got angry. "You hate me, don't you? You don't want to see me happy. That's why you took me away from Moscow," she said emotionally. However, Bella patiently asked Natasha to calm down and suggested that she go home with her mother. Mark, who was starting to worry, tried calling Natasha, but she didn't answer. In the end, he asked her to come over the next day. Unfortunately, the next day, Natasha didn't show up, even though Mark waited all day. Mark finally went to Rufus's house to pick up a package, but Rufus was busy discussing the construction of a swimming pool. So, Mark decided to go to Natasha's house instead. When he arrived, Zena asked him to stop seeing Natasha because, in her opinion, Natasha wasn't a good girl. Besides that, she believed it was for the best for everyone. All day, Mark felt confused and frustrated because he couldn't get any news from Natasha. Luckily, that night, she showed up at his house. She immediately asked, "Why didn't you stand up against all the lies my mom told? You know the truth from me." Feeling cornered, Mark asked back, "Why didn't you stop me from leaving earlier?" Annoyed, Natasha replied, "You're just like my uncle. You can't stand up for yourself. You let other people decide your life." Not wanting to argue, Mark invited her inside. But instead, Natasha asked him to go to Florida with her. "I have a connection with a rich guy who can get us jobs. Don't worry, I'll have a job too," she said excitedly. Mark thought for a moment and agreed. "We can leave tomorrow morning." But then Natasha revealed something shocking. "I can't stay here anymore. Zena and Fima are divorced." Natasha insisted that Fima should leave. Then Natasha told Mark what really happened. After Fima fell asleep, she secretly stretched his balloon to make it longer. When Fima woke up and realized what she was doing, he didn't stop her. But when Zena heard the noise, she got furious. Natasha admitted that she did it because she didn't want to see Fima being taken advantage of by her mother anymore. Hearing all this, Mark was clearly very disappointed. His emotions were all over the place, but despite that, he still invited Natasha inside. That night, they decided to stay over. But Mark didn't feel comfortable sleeping in the same bed as her. The next morning, Mark carefully woke Natasha up before their parents found out. As a gesture of care, he gave her his savings so she could go to Florida. Mark knew he didn't have the courage to leave the country, so he decided that Natasha should go alone. However, what hurt him the most was the feelings that arose because of what she had done. That day, Mark was completely torn. On one hand, he still loved Natasha, but on the other, he struggled to accept what she had done. He even ignored Rufus's calls because he didn't want to face reality. At that moment, Mark's mind was a mess. He couldn't stop imagining what Natasha had done to Fima. After Fima left, Mark immediately went to Rufus's house. But what he found there made his blood boil. Natasha was now living with Rufus. Rufus explained that this was why he had called Mark earlier that morning. Just then, Natasha suddenly appeared at the front of the house, looking lost and confused. Rufus even mentioned that there was no way Natasha could go to Florida because she didn't speak English. He patiently tried to explain that she had come to him, not the other way around. Natasha feels like you betrayed her, Rufus said. Instead of being homeless, it's better for me to take her in, he added sarcastically, mentioning that Natasha was willing to offer him full service. What was even more shocking was that Rufus told Mark to forget about Natasha. She's an easy girl. She'll go with anyone, even with me, despite me being your friend, Rufus said condescendingly. Even though Mark was furious, he lost the courage to fight. When Rufus challenged him to a fight over Natasha, Mark chose to walk away and leave everything behind. With a heavy heart, he let Natasha go forever.